November 1963, Bayonne, New Jersey. A worker climbs a 5-story tank, drops a weighted tape, and logs the number. 90% full. The tape isn't lying. The tank is full of seawater under a film of oil. Wall Street lent $175 million against these tanks. Case 03. The salad oil swindle. A man on a tank shouting a number nobody checks. I collect moments like that. This one had happened before, almost exactly, and the men who paid for round 2 knew all about round 1. It begins with a butcher from the Bronx, a school lunch program, and the discovery that paper can hold more oil than steel can. Open the file. The Bronx, the 1930s. Tino De Angelis is a meat cutter with a gift. He invents a faster way to butcher hogs, and by his 20s, he runs the biggest pork operation in the eastern United States. Short, round, soft-spoken, and very good at being underestimated. In 1949, he buys control of a meat packer called Adolf Goebel and wins a contract feeding America's schoolchildren. The government finds 2 things in the deliveries: overstated weights and 2 million pounds of uninspected meat. The company pays $100,000 and goes under. Remember the school lunches. Wall Street won't. In 1955, De Angelis starts over in salad oil. He acquires a tank farm on the Bayonne waterfront, 139 old petroleum tanks. He founds Allied Crude Vegetable Oil, and the business is real. By 1962, he ships 3/4 of America's soybean and cottonseed oil exports. Understand why the giants dealt with him anyway. Allied was always the cheapest seller. The exporters knew his record, and the banks didn't ask. One buyer admitted it later. Eyes wide open, just not open wide enough. Here is the machine. When Tino borrows against his tanks, the bank wants proof the oil exists. So an outside company takes custody of the tanks and issues warehouse receipts, paper certificates, a stated weight of oil, checked and certified. Banks lend against the paper. Nobody visits a tank. The outside company at Bayonne was a subsidiary of American Express, the traveler's check company. Its name on a receipt made the paper as good as money, and the men who signed those receipts, the custodians walking Tino's tanks, were hired from Tino's own workforce. The visits came with 24 hours notice. The company's own memo admitted, quote, "No actual physical inventories are ever taken." Inside the tanks, the arrangement was simpler. Seawater with a film of oil on top. Beneath the measuring hatch, a welded metal chamber held the only real oil in the tank, so every scheduled tape and sample came up clean. And the tanks were connected by pipes, so the same oil could greet the inspectors, tank after tank, all afternoon. In June 1960, American Express got a phone call. A voice said, quote, "There is, in fact, water in the tanks, and we are counting it as oil." Inspectors went in unannounced and found water. Allied's answer? Broken steam pipes. The file closed. That November, the voice reached the company president's office. Nothing happened for 3 more years. By 1963, the receipts had outrun the country. The paper claimed 1.8 billion pounds of oil, nearly twice as much as the Census Bureau counted in the entire United States. The man from the school lunch program was now the collateral behind loans at Bank of America, Chase, and Continental Illinois. And the oil was only half the bet. De Angelis held futures, wagers on tomorrow's price, over 1 billion pounds of them. 90% of an entire market, betting Russia was about to buy American oil. Every penny the price moved, he made, or lost, $12 million. On margin, with borrowed collateral. On November 15th, Washington paused the Russia deal, and the price broke. The regulators opened their investigation the same day. De Angelis told the exchange president a drop of 1/8 of a cent would wipe out his cash. The drop came in whole cents. In the 5 weeks before the break, Allied's office had been typing new receipts on blank forms stolen from American Express. $39 million of pure forgery walked to Wall Street as collateral. The brokers took them. The paper looked exactly right, because the paper was exactly real. On Tuesday, November 19th, Allied filed for bankruptcy in Newark. On Wednesday morning, the New York Stock Exchange suspended two-member firms caught holding Tino's paper, Ira Haupt & Company and Williston & Bean. 20,000 customer accounts froze. The tanks in Bayonne were about to meet their first honest inspection. Then Friday came, November 22nd, 1963. At noon Dallas time, President Kennedy was assassinated. The exchange closed within the hour. The country stopped. And in the silence, the men of the exchange spent the dark weekend building a rescue, so that a murdered president and a failed brokerage would not become one panic. It held. On Monday, the market stayed dark for the funeral while the deal was signed. The exchange advanced $9.5 million of its own money, a rescue without precedent, and the frozen customers were made whole. On Tuesday, the Dow posted the largest one-day gain in its history. In Bayonne, investigators opened the tanks. One tap ran seawater for 12 days. Of 1.8 billion pounds of oil on paper, barely 100 million was real, and half of that wasn't even oil. The shortage, $175 million, nearly $2 billion today. American Express had certified the bulk of the missing oil. Its stock lost a third of its value in days. And its shareholders faced something worse than a loss. The company was one of the last on Wall Street with accessible shares. If the claims exceeded the assets, the owners could be billed for the difference. The president of American Express, Howard Clark, did something Wall Street considered insane. He declared the company morally bound to cover its subsidiaries' mess and negotiated $60 million for the creditors over shareholders who argued the parent owed nothing. The name, he decided, was worth more than the money. 3 red flags from a file that smelled of salt. 1. The man was the red flag. De Angelis had run the same play before. Fictitious inventory, government money, and everyone who mattered knew. A record isn't history. It's a forecast, until the incentives change. 2. Collateral only counts if someone disinterested touches it. The banks trusted the receipts. The receipts trusted the custodians. The custodians were on the conman's payroll. Every layer assumed the layer below had looked, and no layer ever looked. Paper is not oil. 3. Watch what happens to a warning. A voice told American Express about the seawater in 1960, and the answer was broken steam pipes because the account was too profitable to lose. When the checking costs the checker money, the checking stops. One more entry before the file closes. While Wall Street dumped American Express, a young investor in Omaha counted traveler's checks at steakhouse registers. He decided the name had survived the tanks and put 40% of his partnership, $13 million, into the stock. His name was Warren Buffett. The crowd misprices fear, too. Case 03, closed. The tanks held water. The paper held $2 billion. And the man went to prison, went back to pork, went back to prison, and died in obscurity at 93. Next case, 1938. A listed drug company run by a doctor who is not a doctor, under a name that is not his name, with $19 million of assets that exist only on paper. The collapse will invent the modern audit. That file opens soon. The adjuster, closing. Until it's checked by someone who doesn't profit, it is not yet real.